In East Longmeadow, residents voted on whether or not there should be funding for construction of a new high school to be located at 180 Maple Street in East Longmeadow, including payment of all costs incidental or related thereto. The end result was yes, 68% to 32%. And staying in East Longmeadow, residents also voted on whether or not there should be funding for a new high school natatorium, also located at 180 Maple Street in East Longmeadow. The final vote on the ballot question, yeses by 3,219 votes.